Hello, hello, Jordan Chariton live, Status Coup. Hope everybody had a nice weekend in these trying times. Sorry I'm late. I'm shuffling between the doctor. I've been seeing a chiropractor / physical therapist 3 times a week to try and avoid a third back surgery. So that's where I'm at, but could be worse. Life's good otherwise. Hope you guys are ready for a big week at Status Coup. We have more on the ground reporting that we're going to be doing, including a story I'm looking forward to covering Wednesday. Another city is being poisoned, and this time it is in New York City. So I'll be out on the ground Wednesday. We're also going to be covering a labor event tomorrow. And if you haven't noticed, we've been covering the calm before the strike, I guess you could call it, as we might be seeing a massive historic UPS strike with over 300,000 workers might go on strike in 2.5 weeks or so. If I was a betting man, I would say they're definitely going on strike because UPS's offer was laughable and insulting to the workers. So we covered that the other day. John Farina covered that. So we'll play some clips of that a little bit later and give an update on the potential strike. Joining me now, excited about this, is Zeynab back in action at Status Coup. I asked her a couple times to come on, but she apparently wasn't looking at her phone for a month of me asking.
It's true. I took a break, and my daughter's been on the phone with her friends because it's summertime.
That's okay. I don't take it personally. How you doing, Zana?
Doing good. I've been following your all's everything that Status Coup's been doing. You going down and talking to Trump voters. I saw that Tina made her way back down to Atlanta to cover the Stop Cop City protests there, and some good stuff coming out. And I loved the coverage that you guys did up in Kalamazoo too. That was really good reporting.
Why, thank you. Yeah, it has been busy, and we are trying to keep up, but I'm getting emails every other day with another community being screwed, either through government corruption, environmental calamity, or mix the two together. But we're happy you're back. Would love to have you on more often. This is a good topic. Yes. We're going to get into the Dem party machine, I guess, 1.5 years before the general election, but about 6 months before the primary that they canceled, already telling you tough shit, hold your nose, and you're a bad person if you don't vote for Joe Biden. It's coming earlier this time. So the voter shaming has begun. And Cornel West isn't even officially the Green Party nominee. I mean, I assume he will be, but there still has to be a process. But big name Democrats are already shaming and putting fear mongering into any voter who votes third party. And they have the media doing it too, which tells you if they're doing it this early, they seem a bit concerned, shall we say. Also, Biden, when he's not partying with cocaine in the White House, no evidence of that, just throwing that out there. They're really pushing this Bidenomics stuff, which I want to get into with you because, I mean, full disclosure, you're looking for work. And contrary to what they say, it's not as easy as you would think, or they tell you to get dignified work that can pay a living wage and, you don't have to kill yourself to do. And then we'll get into the UPS strike. Smash that like button, share this live stream. Let's start with the rose-colored glasses, Bidenomics. Things are great. Historic economic recovery, low unemployment, all these things. Colin, if you have the mishmash of their gaslighting on how great the economy is, let's play that first.
The first time in a generation, the path of the middle class seemed out of reach. And I don't think it's hyperbole. I think it's a fact, no matter whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or Independent. I knew we couldn't go back to the same failed policies when I ran. So I came into office determined to change the economic direction of this country, to move from trickle-down economics to what everyone on Wall Street Journal and Financial Times began to call Bidenomics. I didn't come up with the name. I now claim it, but They're the ones that use it first. I got asked by a press person this morning, getting on the helicopter in Washington, why, when I asked you about Bidenomics a long time ago, you said you didn't know what it was. I said, I didn't name it Bidenomics. I didn't realize The Economist and the Wall Street Journal did. But I think it's a plan that I'm happy to call Bidenomics. And guess what? Bidenomics is working. When I took office, the pandemic was raging and our economy was reeling. Supply chains are broken, millions of people unemployed, hundreds of thousands of small businesses on the verge of closing after so many had already closed. Literally hundreds of thousands on the verge of closing. Today, the U.S. has the highest economic growth rate, leading the world economies since the pandemic, the highest in the world. Protect your pensions. Got relief needed. We got relief to folks who needed it most to get the country back on track. They didn't think we could do it. It worked. And not a single Republican voted for it. And then I signed the bipartisan infrastructure law because to have the strongest economy in the world, we need the best infrastructure in the world. Again, that's no joke. We need the best infrastructure in the world. Roads, bridges, airports, water systems, high-speed internet, and so much more. Can you believe we used to have the best infrastructure in the world?
Oh boy. Let me just start with this. This is from Politico. A full court press on Bidenomics. While much of the political attention yesterday focused on the GOP hopefuls barnstorming July 4th parades, Biden and his cabinet were readying to fan out around the country over the next 72 hours, touting Bidenomics. So they're sending the EPA chief. This was last week. EPA chief out to Grand Rapids. I don't particularly know why the EPA chief, who is presiding over a massive cover-up in East Palestine, bipartisan cover-up that's lasted a decade in Flint, among other things. I don't really know what he's talking about. Harris is going around talking about Bidenomics in the critical swing state of Arizona, visiting a Native American reservation. I'm sure the Native Americans are very appreciative of all your kept promises, President Biden, including public drilling right on the next to their reservations. Deb Haaland, the Interior Secretary, is going out. Health Secretary Pete, who's just been a disaster as Transportation Secretary. Biden's sales pitch continues on Friday. He'll pivot to a focus on lowering prescription drug prices, who I interviewed Michael Leidy about this. The quote-unquote lowering of drug prices doesn't actually happen until 2026. We still don't actually know what the drugs are they're lowering. So, but it will be in fundraising emails, and it will be magnified and marketed as if it's something that has been a game changer now. My guess is it's going to be not the most pricey drugs that are life and death for the highest number of people.
Well, we know insulin is not on the list, for instance.
Correct. Absolutely.
So EpiPens are not on the list. So those are two things that we know prompted people to call for the lowering of pharmaceutical prices, and those two aren't on the list.
No. So that's, I don't know. It seems like they're trying to put lipstick on a pig. I guess you have to, because he's running for re-election and he's running on things that kind of you could check in a box and putting in a fundraising email and do commercials for and hope that, low information voters bite. But, I mean, you've been part of and probably over 100 campaigns in some capacity. I think it's going to come down to independents, and I think it's going to come down to young people and black voters, which he's shrinking in both of those categories. Hillary Clinton had less black voters in 2016 as compared to Obama in 2012, particularly in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. And that's why she lost, in addition to other things. The polls show that 65% of voters in the Democratic side are concerned about his mental and physical state, Young people are not buying what he's selling, and black voters, which are generally the stronghold of the Democratic Party, his numbers are not so strong among them. And I would say the reason is it just no longer works to cite GDP, an artificial low unemployment number, the stock market, and whatever other mess he wants to mention, because people aren't feeling it, because for most people, that doesn't apply to them. It applies to the top 5 to 10% or so.
Yeah, the crunch is on the rest of the country. I mean, you could possibly peddle that and ignore poverty. Unethical too, but you could peddle that and ignore poverty 30 years ago easier than you can today. We have, we have Gen Z, Gen Y that are moving back in with their parents. We have people by the millions coming out of retirement, going back to work because of cuts to Social Security, cuts to Medicaid, and Medicare. When people are seeing these actual physical cuts to these programs that used to help keep us afloat, they're going to attribute that to Biden and no slogan. Oh man, but Bidenomics is just as bad as what was it, malarkey?
Yeah.
It's pretty terrible. And what they're touting, what I haven't heard is any kind of solutions. There's a plan. It's an economic plan. It's called Bidenomics. Here's a couple of stats that every politician uses to prove that the economy is doing great, and that's it. That seems to encompass his entire, while they're giving millions to wars, and they're decreasing the tax bracket for the upper 1% and putting more crunch on the working class.
It's also very similar to the same formulaic messaging we've gotten from Obama. I was such a success because I brought us out of the depths of the Great Recession, blah, 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 blah. But it's not so much anything he did or anything Biden did. These booms or busts are just cyclical. Yes, you could do things to make it worse, but it's not exactly anything to brag about. I got us out of, sinking like the Titanic, and now we're just back to, a nice boat with lots of holes in it. I mean, that's basically what we're back to. A nice boat, which is, the upper deck for 1 to 5% of the country, and the rest of it sinking and has holes in it for the rest of us. But to him and to the Democratic Party, and frankly, a lot of their baby boomer hardcore base, who's comfortable for the most part, the MSNBC type viewer, suburban moms, they're doing fine. So they don't feel what we're feeling, and they don't see it. And when you point it out to them, they say, "What do you want, Trump?" Because they're not feeling, the working 2 jobs, or having to drive Lyft or Uber on top of the jobs, or rationing, or choosing between medicine or groceries, this and that. And I, for one, I worked in corporate media, independent media. It's always the same bullshit: GDP, growth, low unemployment. It doesn't really mean a thing. You yourself, yes, there are jobs open, not necessarily jobs that you could live off of if you are a single parent, or even if you are a married couple with multiple kids, whatever, and all the expenses you have.
Yeah, that's one of the problems that with utilizing the unemployment numbers, and Democrats will do this when they're talking about Republicans, because this is something they called Trump out on all the time, right? They were like, oh, well, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics doesn't accurately reflect the unemployment numbers. But when there's a Democrat as president in office, you won't hear them call that out. But the Bureau of Labor and Statistics themselves have stated that this isn't a good reflection, that the numbers coming from their office on unemployment is not a good reflection, and they've been pushing to have it changed for a long time for a couple of reasons. One, it doesn't count people who are out of work for more than 6 months. So if you can't find a job for more than 6 months, it doesn't take that into account. It doesn't take into account temp work, and it doesn't take into account fluctuating gig work. So somebody can be considered employed if they're self-employed, even when they're between contracts. And sometimes those those contracts gaps can stretch a year or two, and that's not going to be wrapped in. Since they have a business, EIC number, they're going to be considered employed, even if they're not getting any contracting work at that moment. So the 4% isn't reflective at all of what the real nature is of the unemployment rate in the country. And I had read a recent article in Time magazine talking about, yes, there's a lot of jobs you can find on job posting websites. There's a lot of places that appear to be hiring, but a trend that is happening are ghost postings, are what some folks call them. And it's where a company will post several job openings, even if those jobs aren't available for hire. And they will utilize this to show to their shareholders, especially when they're publicly traded, that they're growing, to show a growth metric. However, it's a false growth metric. And you also have where HR departments will post just to keep themselves afloat and have a reason to be at the at the workplace. So it's around 75% of job postings that you see on places like Indeed, Monster, elsewhere, either hiring internally, so they've already decided who's getting that spot and they're just posting out a protocol, or there are these ghost postings where it's just companies trying to look for investors. So they're feigning that they're growing by doing basically false postings.
Right.
So
there's something else.
Look at all of this. Oh, well, there's one other thing I was going to say really quick. You look at all of this, and then you look at the fact that people have to work 2, 3, 4 gig jobs, or in a lot of places, you have a bubble where it's really hard to get a job for millennials if you have degrees because you're overqualified, or it's such a big bubble that you're underqualified and you're competing with 600 or 700 people because they fed us a line: go to college, get a degree. And that used to be true maybe 20 years ago. Go to college, get a degree, get a high paying job. We flooded the market with us going to college, getting into debt. And now so many who have those degrees who did what Biden suggests in Bidenomics. We followed the protocols. We did everything we were supposed to do. We followed the quote unquote American dream. And now, you got people applying at a lot of the jobs that are available, which are, retail, gig work, things like that. And there's nothing wrong with those jobs. The problem with them is they don't pay enough to keep a roof over your head.
Right. And I don't even know what that means. They're not defining Bidenomics. They're just kind of using kind of marketing slogans. Is it like, I know what Bernie was running on, Medicare for all, but there's not like one economic policy he has done that is a specific tangible to lift people out of anything. Unemployment insurance, a year of the child tax credit that expired, that he didn't have the political leadership or courage to fight to extend.
That we had to pay back.
There you go. I mean, we could go down the list. People had to pay back in some cases the COVID rental assistance. He ran on a public option, gone. Backdoor, he's basically continuing a lot of Trump's policies that basically are trying to privatize Medicare. Thank God in New York City, a court just overruled Mayor Eric Adams when he's not insulting Holocaust victims. For those of you who live in New York City, he just yelled at a tenants' rights activist who was also fled the Holocaust, basically saying she was being racist by criticizing him. It was a whole to-do. But he was also trying to take New York City retirees, older retirees, strip away their public health insurance and put them on Medicare Advantage, a private health insurance, which Biden's basically trying to do the same thing. But there's also another component, and I know you've had this issue of long COVID. Disability claims are significantly up. If you have that, what I just sent you, Colin, disability claims in America, and It's not a lot of coverage of the disabled. It's not a sexy topic, but an important one. The number of people with a disability dramatically increased and hit a new record of 34 million in June 2023. I'm not an epidemiologist, but I would have to think the magical psychops that is COVID's over, don't worry about it, even though the few people still monitoring it, mostly still through like wastewater, which you could tell if you have high COVID or a new variant or something through wastewater patterns. A lot of people have been disabled by COVID or long-term symptoms, some worse than others, that it makes it difficult to hold a job, or you could only really do freelance or part-time because you just have fatigue or whatever else, other symptoms. I know you've had some of the long COVID. So between long-term disabled, you also have, Colin, I put this in there, minimum wages are going up, but typical workers still don't make enough to get by in any U.S. state. So this is CNBC. 23 states and Washington, D.C. raised their minimum wage in January of this year. 4 more are poised to do it later this year. Depending on location, new wages range from $9.95 in Montana to $16.10 in D.C., while the federal minimum wage has remained stagnant at $7.25 per hour since 2009. Many states have continually raised theirs. States began instituting their own higher minimum wage during periods of federal inaction. Still, the vast majority of single people working full-time and making a local minimum wage aren't earning enough to get by. CNBC compared state minimum wages with the average living wage for one adult with no dependents, according to MIT's living wage calculator, and found that no state offers a minimum wage that is in line with the living wage. We then compared those to income brackets for non-family households from the Census Bureau to see how many individuals are making near or below the living wage in each state. In Kansas, for example, where the minimum wage is $7.25 per hour and the living wage is $15.69, about 48% of non-family households fall within or below the income bracket that includes that living wage. I mean, I could get more into the numbers, but this is giving me 2015, 2016 vibes in terms of Hillary Clinton thinking she could just run on like Obama's fairy dust, that the economy was strong then, which it wasn't, and running a dud campaign with no coherent message. Biden's not even running a campaign. He says he's not even going to physically campaign until the fall. I wonder why. I just get deja vu. Sure, Trump by then might be 3 times indicted, 4 times indicted. If he makes a deal and drops out, which I predict could happen, it could be DeSantis. But if you have a third-party candidate, which we'll get to our next topic, if Cornel West or whomever it is polls 3 to 5%, that could be definitive in the states that matter, Wisconsin, Michigan, et cetera. And it seems like the Democratic Party is trying the same exact playbook. Not Russia yet. They're not blaming Russia yet, but they're blaming us for their total lack of any bold economic policy. He still has the executive action pen that he could whip out now that I think could convince some people that might go towards Cornel West or a third party or just say, fuck it, I'm not voting. There's still things he could do. Others have pointed out, fuck the Supreme Court. There's things you could do through existing legislation to get rid of these student loan debts. He's just not doing any of it.
Right. And, you know, he could do something, for instance, like adjust the poverty, the federal poverty guidelines to be in line with the actual cost of living for the average American right now. So right now, the poverty guidelines are what, for like a single person, I believe it's 16,000 would be considered poverty. That's not just poverty. That's completely destitute. For a family of 2, for instance, a single mother and a child like myself, it's 19,000 a year. And that is the bar, that's like the cap for things like Medicaid. So if he was to actually expand the poverty thresholds and make them in line with inflation, in line with modern cost of living, could do a lot of good immediately. Just that one thing. If he did a second thing and adjusted, put some pressure and crackdown on the credit agencies and on illicit credit ranking practices that keeps people from being able to get, houses or loans, and, and forces them to get into debt in order to build their credit. He promised that when he ran. He's not done anything about that. He could adjust that now under the executive branch, but he doesn't. So there's plenty of things that the executive branch has the power to do right now that they're just not doing at all, that they don't really need, Congress's approval. Like you said, executive orders exist, but even beyond that, most of these social safety net programs, even though Congress allots the funds for them, once the funds are allotted, a lot of this is executed federally through the executive branch. What's he doing through all of his different agencies in order to make sure that people are getting help?
Right. And I also think at the end of the day, it really comes down to they've all kind of lucked out in many ways over the last decade. And what I mean by that, Obama, I think if he ran against Trump in 2012, it could have been a different picture. He's very lucky he ran against Gordon Gekko. And there was a tape. There was a tape of, 47, remember Mitt Romney, and 47% of the country is moochers and all that. I mean, Obama did beat him by a significant amount, but he was just a fucking porcupine, vanilla, greedy, lifeless candidate. And Obama got lucky with who he was facing. 2016, frankly, Hillary Clinton, I can't think of a worse candidate. I think Trump got lucky. 2020, I think if Trump would have delivered one more check, which some reports said he wanted to, but Mitch McConnell was pushing back on it, another relief check during COVID, I think Trump could have won. He only lost by 20,000 votes in Wisconsin. Pennsylvania, 80,000 votes. Michigan, 150,000. I mean, campaigns. That's not a big enough margin that it can't be flipped. So 2022 midterms, contrary to the media spin, nobody was, Dems didn't get their Senate seats saved because of Biden's charisma and Bidenomics. It was Roe. It was the Supreme Court. So a lot of these Democrats, and in one case, Trump, they've had some kind of lucky breaks. Unless something happens between now and next year, I don't really see any of that lucky charm for Biden. And it's very clear to me. I mean, you've worked on campaigns. You were basically writing stuff that AOC, stole and spoke your words when you were with AOC and them at the beginning of Brand New Congress and Justice Democrats. It seems very clear to me a big part of this, let's not have a primary, let's not have debates, is they don't want to put him on a stage if they don't have to. They don't even want to put him out on, they don't want to put him on the campaign trail, period, if they don't have to.
I think there's a gap there right now in his ability to quickly answer. And I don't mean this in an ageist way. It's just literally his response time to questions from reporters and otherwise has been really on rocky footing lately. But we're already seeing where AOC has endorsed Biden this week.
Correct.
Bernie endorsed Biden this week. Now, we don't even know 100% all the different people that may be running in the Democratic Party primary. Why are there progressive candidates who unseated establishment Democrats saying to vote for the milquetoast president that we have right now, who really has not done anything? Kids are still in cages. Kids are still in cages. People would say, don't vote for Trump, which I wouldn't anyway for many reasons, but I didn't want to vote for Biden either. But they would say, Biden's a great guy. If you want to make sure that kids are out of cages and you want to make sure immigrants are treated fairly, you have to vote for Biden. His immigration policy has been just as bad as Trump's and worse in some other ways. His censorship has been worse in some other ways. He's passed now He's passed now like domestic terrorism laws that make it difficult to do any kind of union organizing or organizing. Folks can just be slapped a label on as domestic terrorists, like in Cop City. People are seeing this. And even though they might not vote for Trump, they might vote for DeSantis, because even though we see a lot of what's going on in Florida, people who are informed and in politics or on the left or, liberal or whatever it might be, sees it. A lot of Americans don't.
Right.
They're not as drilled in or tapped in. And so they just see this guy coming out. Compared to Biden, DeSantis is making some economic subscriptions or prescriptions. So he's going to come out with a plan with some prescriptions. Biden's going to have, well, it's just called Bidenomics. It's going great right now, you guys. It's going awesome because my presidency is awesome and I'm infallible. You compare those two with someone giving solutions to people's pain points right now, or someone saying everything is already great, vote for me again. Where are people going to go on that? Because Biden's not even admitting that we have major economic issues right now. He's really running under that everything's great, Bidenomics has saved us message.
Right. Last thing on this, and then we'll move on to the voter shaming. And by the way, thanks for the super chats. Keep them coming. We'll read them at the end. So we really need them. I'll keep it real. And Zana was with us for a short time. These on-the-ground trips, although they're important, are kicking our ass. We lost a shit ton of money on the Cop City reporting. I don't regret it. Important to cover that. But we didn't meet our fundraising goals for that trip, which doesn't surprise me. It's the dead of summer and people are struggling. But it costs money to do this. Obviously, we had to make cuts recently for the reasons I explained to the audience last week. So if you can, sign up as a Status Coup member. I'm going to be on the ground this week. Talking to Lewis about sending him back out there probably next month, and a couple other things in the frying pan too. So if you can, statuscoup.com/join. Super chats are super appreciated. As you can see, the rest of the left seems to be focused on interpersonal nonsense, and I've seen more videos on Anna Kasparian this week than I have about the 4 fucking record hot days on planet Earth. Let me repeat: 4 days last week were record hot days on planet Earth. When I say record, meaning the hottest days since they've been recording. Not to say the TYT drama isn't important, and God knows people know my thoughts. But, there's important stuff going on. We should keep our eyes on the ball. Thank you for the super chats. Last thing I'll say on this, listen, at the end of the day, Democrat young people, when I say young people, I'm going to say 18 to 34. No offense to older viewers, but young people is really what helped the Democrats in the midterms. They held their nose. The data showed they came out much stronger than in previous midterms. There tend to be a drop-off in midterm elections, like older folks on both sides tend to vote consistently, presidential and midterms, but the younger people drop off as compared to presidential voting. That happened less this time. There were more young voters. But the thing about young voters, they don't have as much allegiance to any political party as the older generation. They don't give a fuck. And yes, they don't want fascism. They don't want Trump. They don't want DeSantis. They care about, trans people under attack, LGBT people under attack, women's rights under attack. With that said, if they don't have, inherent or instinctual allegiance to the Democratic Party, and yes, they don't want fascism, but they don't see anything in the 3 years Biden was president that Biden or the Democrats have done to stave off fascism. They didn't codify Roe when they had the opportunity. Biden, $10,000 student loan debt, $20,000 for those on Pell Grants. Didn't really fight for it. There are, like we just talked about, there are things he could do to go around the Supreme Court. Won't do it. I mean, we could go down the list in terms of disappointments to young people. I'm not going to say they're going to turn their eye, and there are still young people who would hold their nose and vote for Biden, but there are also, I think, a sizable enough a group of young people that will vote third party or not vote at all because, well, I'm not going to reward the lesser of two evils. They just have a different mentality, or I'm not going to reward.
Attention. They're paying attention. Gen Z are on top of it when it comes to politics, policy, legislation, what's happening, and they're extremely savvy, not necessarily, deeply on the interworkings of economics, but that we have economic problems, and they want to hear solutions.
Right. Absolutely. And also, at the end of the day, there is fascism going on. You see what's going on in Georgia right now? You could say, well, it's a Republican governor. Well, there's 2 Democratic senators who are saying nothing about nonviolent activists being charged as domestic terrorists for nothing. An environmental protester being assassinated by police. It's a Democratic mayor. It's a Democratic, 2 Democratic senators. The president can weigh in. They're all crickets. Well, Biden won Georgia in 2020. Hasn't happened since 1992 for a Democrat because more black people came out in Atlanta. I'm going to take a guess those numbers might go down considering what's been going on there and we've been covering on the ground. So we'll see. But bottom line, Bidenomics is a whole bunch of bullshit malarkey, if you ask me.
Bidenomics equals Reaganomics. And that's what people think of, and they'll be like, yeah, it kind of is like Reaganomics.
Absolutely. Moving on, obviously you were for a short period with MPP. I don't know what the hell they are now other than Nick Brana and a bunch of, 5 stands for him. But Cornel West obviously ruffling some feathers, so much so that CNN is dedicating segments to, should Democrats be worried? We've seen thought pieces in, kind of digital establishment rags, why Cornel West should run in the Democratic Party instead of third party, those kind of things. And I find it very interesting that they're doing this in July of 2023. First, let's play CNN last week, basically posing the question of whether Dems should worry about this.
Playing that sound from Cornel West, which was so interesting. He's been a major figure in progressive politics for some time. So now we see where he's going. This recent NBC News poll really stood out to me. 45% of Democrats say they'd consider backing a third-party candidate. Compare that to 34% of Republicans. How concerned do you think Joe Biden should be tonight?
He should be a little concerned, and I'll say this because my affinity to Cornel West. He's my frat brother. I got my PhD in part because I was drawn intellectually to the heft of his scholarship. So he resonates, and he has resonated particularly with the African-American community for quite some time, for decades, frankly. So if you're Joe Biden, this is likely to be a close race, whether it's DeSantis or Trump, whoever it is, that it's those margins in some states, in a handful of states, where this third-party candidate could be effective, particularly when you look at 2022, you see that numbers, especially in the African-American community, were not where the Democrats needed them to be. So if there is concern about how close the general election might be, with memories of Jill Stein from 2016, this should concern Biden and Democrats a little bit based on the issues that Cornel West will be able to address.
So a little bit of a concern for Biden and the Democrats. What about for the Republicans?
I think there's another one too, right, Colin?
Well, look, I think for me personally, if Democrats seem to think that Cornel West is the problem, then they don't seem to recognize why they lost to President Trump in 2016 in the first place. It certainly was not because of Jill Stein. It was because there was a blue-collar revolt from people who felt as if the Democratic Party had left them behind. And so for me, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you see somebody like Cornel West, who, politics aside, has dedicated his life to justice, the only thing they should have to say to him is thank you. And instead, they send somebody like David Axelrod, the architect of the Obama generation, to go out there and take the hats to him, to try to marginalize him, which I think, again, plays into exactly everything he's talking about, that this is a party that is more concerned with the status quo than they are with the safety and security of black and brown communities. And I would also say that we can't forget that this is the same Cornel West that, again, was ostracized because he wanted to support somebody like Bernie Sanders and wanted to push a little further, was ostracized because he wanted to have a black state of the union back with Tavis Smiley to talk about what was rightfully owed to a black community that came out in record numbers to help elect the first black president. So again, for me, it just confirms what many believe is that the Democratic Party seemingly has forgotten about what they claim is their core conviction, trying to make sure they can deliver results to multi-generational poverty and despair for the people that effectively are the bedrock of that party.
So it's interesting. I was struck today, the fact that Cornel West, who we know was a major surrogate, obviously, for Bernie Sanders, so was Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who today said she's supporting Joe Biden.
And what they were talking about,
Of course, they got to pull that out.
right? What they were talking about was David Axelrod, who was one of Obama's top guys. He tweeted out, in 2016, the Green Party played an outside role in tipping the election to Donald Trump. Now, with Cornel West as their likely nominee, they could easily do it again. Risky business, he says. Risky business. Well, let's first...
Democracy's risky business.
Yes. Let's first drill into that. I mean, it was 2016. I don't want to dwell on it 7 years later, but this is a faulty theory. By the data, yes, if every Jill Stein voter would have voted for Hillary Clinton, she would have won those states. But that's assuming that's how it works. And every Jill Stein voter would have voted for a Democrat, or every Gary Johnson voter, for example, because he was also part of that. He got more votes than Jill Stein, would have voted for Trump. That's not how it works. In most cases, those polled who voted for Jill Stein or Gary Johnson said they would not vote for anyone but the third party candidate. So it's basically like you're gaslighting them to vote for, in that case, Hillary Clinton, or in this case, Joe Biden, but they're not automatically aligned. That's not their next candidate. Like if this was ranked choice voting, Joe Biden wouldn't necessarily be their next, their second option. So
no, and there's proof to that, because when Bernie lost the primary, there were voters that switched from Bernie to voting for Trump instead of Hillary. There were a lot larger number of voters that switched from Bernie, voted for Bernie in the Democratic primary, and then voted for Trump than were that voted for Jill Stein and Johnson combined.
And by the way, David Axelrod won't say this, but in his election, there were more voters for Hillary Clinton in the primary that switched to John McCain. In the general, more Bernie voters voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016 than Hillary Clinton voters voted for Obama in the general. So they're pushing out a false perception that their next option would naturally be Hillary Clinton. But putting that aside, listen, Cornel West, he's not the official nominee yet. I don't love the process because it sucks that basically for a year, all he could really do is do interviews and, stay out there, but he can't really, he could go around and rally, but not as the official nominee, which sucks, of the Green Party. And yes, it should be, a process for sure. But what I think, Cornel West, it's very possible he could get in some of these states 5%, 6%. I look at a place like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. I don't see no disrespect to Jill Stein, but Cornel West is better known. I don't know what the hell's going on with the screen. Hold on. Cornel West is better known than Jill Stein. He's, more nationally recognized, definitely a different style, and, very inspiring. So I think at the end of the day, it seems to me they clearly don't want to take the route of, hey, Biden, you should be worried about this because he could pull X amount of votes in these states. For these particular voters, maybe we should try doing X, Y, and Z, executive action or something to persuade those voters, even if they're not in love with us, to vote for us, citing we did this in, a year before the election. They don't want to go that route. Why? Because they don't want to piss off their donors who they're desperately trying to hoard money from right now.
It's also a level of not understanding where the country is politically. So, and shout out to Case Study QB, because I noticed that was one of his videos. He's always watching the news for us so that we don't have to watch all the time, like the public in general. I'm always going on to Case's web or Twitter to see what's up. So, but the what I saw these journalists and commentators doing was setting a notion. So it's like a chicken before the egg kind of thing. What causes it? What causes low voter turnout in third party candidates? Is it in part because the media is always saying that's a wasted vote and always sort of assuming what percentage is going to come out or how many people are going to come out, or that it's going to, that obviously this candidate is going to fail? And that's sort of the cycle that I see. That's the cycle I saw with the non-traditional candidates that were running against incumbents. Well, why are you even running in a primary? It's impossible to win against an incumbent, and then we would sometimes have pundits like those people that we just saw a few minutes ago saying, well, and this person, AOC, is likely going to lose against Joseph Crowley because he's this, and this, and this, and he had this many votes. So I would see in some of the races, it would be that media influence that would actually push people to be voting for the establishment candidate. So are they setting the trend? Is it a self-fulfilling prophecy in that aspect? But there's another thing that they're not considering as much, and it's the fact that nearly 70% of the country now in polls over and over again are showing that they don't align with either political party and would vote independent or third party. That's a huge chunk of the country. When you look at it 10 years ago, or when I first started politics, that was only at 25%. And now it's at 60%. That's a huge shift. And a lot of that is Gen Z, but also people, their illusions have been broken, I believe, because our economy and everything is so bad. And we've seen the parties, turn their backs on us so much that people are tired of it. So really, I feel like with Cornel West, it's a ball, it's up in the air. And I'm usually pretty good at predictions and usually nail it down pretty well. But right now, I have no idea what could be possible because of this zeitgeist we're at being so unique to any political climate that we've had before in the last, few decades.
Could you leave the stream and come back? Because you have like a crackling happening on your end, like a static. And
yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. We'll try her dipping out and coming back. There's one, and keep smashing the like button. Share this live stream. Super chats are appreciated. So there's another element to that I think is important. You got to remember, whatever you think of him now, because I know there's a lot of people that are disappointed, but there was literally millions of new people that entered the political process in 2015, 2016, under Bernie. What I was saying, Zana, is there's another element that there was millions of new people that re-entered the political process, and then there was a ton of people that re-entered after kind of checking out for a while due to cynicism, apathy, whatever, and rightful apathy.
And COVID.
So, right. So between 2015, 2016, the Bernie wave, millions of people now for 7 years, if this was their first foray into politics, they've been told, the sky is going to fall if you don't hold your nose and vote for either Hillary or Biden. They've been told that, it's going to get much, much worse if we have Republicans in office. And on the state level, that's obviously being shown in many ways. I think what DeSantis is doing in Florida, Governor Abbott in Texas, Lewis just had a report how he's basically trying to pass a law to, get rid of water breaks for construction workers, not to mention the attacks on transgender people, et cetera, et cetera. So
and
on a state level,
houses, and some of these governorships, the Democratic Party hasn't even tried to mount a challenge. And it's something in the red states, the average is about 75 to 80% of local seats in those red states are completely unchallenged.
Right.
So the Democratic Party is just like completely abandoned a bunch of these places. So Folks don't even have a choice there. But then on the national level, they're going to use these places as the boogeyman in order to say you have to vote for Biden because look at what's happening in Florida, even though we basically abandoned it. You know,
Right.
so it almost benefits them that there's so much insane fascism happening from the right.
But I think at the end of the day, for all these new people that got into politics and a lot of older people that re-entered because of the Bernie wave, they've kind of seen both sides. They've seen a Trump presidency and what they were told was going to be much, much worse if we allow it, and a Biden presidency. Are there some things that are clearly different for the worse under a Republican? Yeah, I'm not going to lie. But there's also a lot of things that we were told would be better under a Democrat that are actually worse. So the bottom line is you can't keep using that scare tactic of, you know, fascism. It's going to get a lot worse, particularly for vulnerable people, if you don't vote for Biden or you don't, you know, or stop screwing around with this risky business, because for most people, it's been the same under both economically, if not worse. So to me, that's the difference. You have all these new people that got in there and they're not as naive or impressionable because they've seen the fascist president in Trump. They've seen the supposedly kinder, softer president in Biden. And at the end of the day, it's all the same shit on what matters, which is food on the table, gas in the car, you know, can I support my children? And it's not much different. Obviously, you had COVID, which threw a monkey wrench, but for the key years that you're going to look at, which is the first years of the Trump presidency versus Biden, yes, Biden had COVID longer than Trump had to deal with it. But economically, what's really the difference? The main difference, Biden didn't do a massive tax cut that benefited wealthy people, but he's done a lot of other shit that has benefited wealthy people, including not going after capital gains taxes, not trying for a wealth tax. I mean, he's told wealthy people, your standard of living, nothing's going to change. And he's kept that promise.
Millions and millions and, well, what is it? Is it 4.6 billion total, I believe, when you wartime spending and to the military industrial complex, he's the most any president has ever spent. And that is including adjusting for inflation. That on top of suggesting that states who didn't spend, instead of requiring them to spend COVID money on the COVID relief money that they were granted on public works programs and social services, he suggested that they spend it on militarizing their police, which they've done, which of course benefits corporations. So there are a lot of things that he has done in other ways to benefit companies other than a tax cut. And if you actually take a step aside, take away the rhetoric and the crazy tweeting from Donald Trump every day, and you look at the immigration policies, you look at the censorship policies, like those that, you know, we were talking about, the domestic terrorism policies that they're now using in Cop City to arrest people and charge them. That's Biden administration policies. You look at how much is being spent on the military industrial complex. When you start looking at the actual policy, yes, the rhetoric was different with Donald Trump, and there was some dangers in that rhetoric for sure. But if you look at the actual policies, Biden is way worse. So when folks want to go and voter shame because they say, you know, don't vote for a third party candidate because you're going to get Trump, and you're actually looking at the policies, and I'm kind of like, yeah, take away the mean tweets and take away working directly with the Nazis and instead working covert with the Nazis, and you get Biden.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, I also don't want, let's call a spade a spade. Trump is plenty horrible too. There's a lot of terrible things his administration did. But on economic matters, on the military industrial complex, I think he could say whatever he wants. I think he'd be basically doing the same thing on Ukraine, because it's not really the presidents that drive foreign policy. It's the CIA and the military industrial complex. Don't forget, a lot of people fail to say it, Trump actually armed Ukraine and gave them weapons while he was president. That is never mentioned. Obama, I don't credit him much, but Obama didn't do that. But at the end of the day, on the economic Hunger Games that we live in the new Gilded Age we live in, it's really all the same shit. The only difference really being one party is just overt. We're going to give free money to rich people. That's the Republicans with their tax cuts, deregulation. And the other party kind of sprinkles some crumbs for the proletariat while never actually trying to take from the top. That's really the only difference. But it's all basically screwing you either directly or just screwing you by keeping the status quo. I will say, I think it's a good thing Cornel West is running third party. I don't want DeSantis as president. I would fight him on day one. But I also don't think we could continue this cycle for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Well, hold your nose because we can't have worse. Well, then you're never going to get better. And I think
if we don't actually take a step and take a chance, nothing is going to change. Now with Cornel West, I think what it comes down to is being able to mount a strong campaign, bring people on that know what they're doing, build up your staff, organize on the ground, reach people. You got to be on social media, but you also have to be on the ground building up in the states. If they can build a strong campaign, I believe that, he could potentially do very well. But it's about really building that campaign. And sometimes with independent candidates, it's where you run into that's really where the rubber meets the road, and sometimes why they don't do as well. But this is a very unique opportunity I don't think it's going to be unique in the future. Just this is the first presidential election that we've seen where Gen Z are going to be voting, and their voting is outpacing boomers. So the amount of Gen Z that could possibly vote is the same percentage as boomers that can possibly vote. That has not been the case for generations now. The boomers have been the largest voting bloc, far outpacing millennials, Gen X, other generations. So now we're seeing a bit of a generational shift. Not that, I'm sure there's plenty of, not to judge or say how boomers would vote one way or another, just to say that the voter pool is diversifying and It's expanding. And so anything is possible, because this will be the first election besides the midterms that we're really going to see this massive voter bloc who is engaged politically, making their voices heard. So an independent candidate could get a good chunk depending on their outreach.
And also, this is a topic for another day, and we should look into it more. But it doesn't get discussed much. One of the fastest growing voter suppression tactics is college campuses. If you look at what happened in Texas during the Democratic primary between Biden and Bernie, Bernie, it was kind of surprising he was even competing in Texas. But Texas colleges have more people than a lot of cities have. And people were waiting online 9 hours, 10 hours. That's intentional. And that's been happening all over the country and college campuses, which at this point is Gen Z. And it's by design. They are trying to suppress college vote. They are not allowing people, if you have a student ID to vote, you need three different forms of ID, this and that. So there is obviously black voters is voter suppression tactics, purging black voters off the rolls. That's not going anywhere. But there has been increased appetite, particularly among Republicans, to suppress the vote of younger people, Gen Z, millennials, knowing that exactly what she's saying, not that they will exercise their right to vote at the same proportion as baby boomers, but the sheer numbers, there are that many now eligible to vote, equal, if not greater than the baby boomers. But listen, at the end of the day, if your standard of living has not materially gotten better or worse in the last under Trump or Biden, unless you are somebody that feels, rightly so, a greater threat, whether it's an LGBT person, trans person, et cetera, because of the Republican proposals, policies, hate, I totally understand people holding their nose. But if you have, 3 kids and you're barely making it, you can only focus on what you could focus on, and you're not going to be so driven to vote for Biden because of the bipartisan infrastructure deal. that does not materially affect your life, or tax incentives for green energy, which would have been nice 15 years ago, or, name your neoliberal crumb cake. It's just not going to do it. That doesn't mean you don't care about vulnerable people, but we're all vulnerable in this predicament, which is the economic Hunger Games. And I just think the key term will be organized. Third parties, we know about MPP. We know the Green Party has had a lot of organizing problems, but they did get Jill Stein on 48 ballots. She was eligible in, I believe, 45 or 48, I forget, ballots in 2016. So if Cornel West can get on over 40 states ballots, I don't even think he needs to be on a debate stage, because, him going on Joe Rogan, him doing the media circuit, rallies, this and that, the man is inspirational. I remember watching him in New Hampshire the night before the New Hampshire primary in 2020. I mean, he's got a lot of that Nina Turner, Obama, even though he's full of it, and then some. There's just something about him, and people need to be inspired right now. So we'll see. I'm not going to lie and say he could win. I don't know. I mean, crazier things have happened, but he could certainly.
It's hard to know. There's a lot of unregistered, so only a small percentage of the country votes anyway for the presidency. Right. Only a fraction. So there's a lot of. One question I have is a Trump-Biden presidency going to cause so much apathy, which I wouldn't blame people for, because I feel like I want to dig back into my community organizing and local organizing and not really focus on the presidency. So how many people are feeling that? And will there be a level of apathy? So will voter turnout be as high as it was when Bernie was engaging people, which it spiked up? Or when, way back in 2008, when Obama first ran, we kind of had seen dips. So I feel like a Trump-Biden show, presidency might drum up a lot of apathy. I'm not saying it would, but that's one concern that I have, that, less people are going to show up to vote. And then who might be more likely to show up to vote are the people who are diehard in one party faction or another. So
I'll say right now, it's not directly linked, but I do think Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr. are making a major mistake. I think they should have, maybe they have been, they should have been on the phones yesterday and been announcing 3 debates between each other. I'm sure, he's not my favorite person, but I'm sure Rogan would do one. Whether it be Rogan or some other high profile independent media, because I think it would be highly viewed. I think it would show, just at least articulation wise, a very, very sharp contrast to Biden. And I think it would shame Biden and the Democratic Party. Maybe not just the first one, but if you have 2 or 3, I think it would really put the pressure on the Democrats to hold at least one debate with Biden, because it would get to a point where Democrats are going to say, it might not be Cornel West, it might be us canceling the primary that fucks us, because enough voters are going to say, yeah, I'm not voting for you because you guys just got rid of democracy on our side. Yeah. Even if they are scared of Trump or DeSantis, you might repeal enough voters that are saying, no, like, you didn't even subtly rig it, you just canceled it. So I think they should be doing that. And that brings me to, listen, Ross Perot got on a debate stage with Bill Clinton and the first President Bush. If somehow Cornel West or whomever the third party candidate managed to get on a debate stage in September or October against Biden and Trump or Biden and DeSantis, I would say, who the fuck knows? Because I think the contrast would be very stark. And I think he could really shame and embarrass and go at both of them in a way that Bernie was just not willing to. So we'll see. I think that's a pipe dream at this point. But hey, if somebody is polling at 4 to 6% without even officially being a nominee for any third party, without rallying or doing anything, that's pretty impressive, I think. Last topic, real quick. All of this might also be affected if there's a long-term strike of over 300,000 workers. True. UPS right now, we've been covering it. UPS was just offered an insulting proposal. UPS workers were just offered an insulting proposal by UPS. UPS workers just won air conditioning in their trucks, so you know the bottom of what they're coming from. And if they don't get a real proposal
air conditioning, could you imagine that?
It's disgusting. And if they don't get a real offer by August 1st, already 97% of Teamsters and UPS workers have, voted to strike. I think you're going to have a major strike, and it certainly would affect the economy. But in this case, the Democrats don't have a early 20th century law like the Railroad Act to force the UPS workers to force the shutdown of a strike, which they did with the railroad workers. Let's show you. John Farina went out last week and covered some of it. This was just a practice picket, and they had a shit ton of energy and a shit ton of people. AOC decided to make a cameo, so I guess she learned from her not showing up from Amazon. So she was there too, but let's show some of this.
Piece of the pie. We are tired of getting crumbs. We have families just like them. I put pepperoni and extra cheese. We want it. Let's get it all. We want it. Let's get it all. We have part-timers that they won't tell y'all. The drivers make a decent wage. It's not even good enough. Because they're out there in the heat, the winter. They need more money. And they tell y'all, oh, they make $40. But what they won't tell y'all is this. We have part-timers in there only making $16 living in shelters. How do you be a multi-billion-dollar company and you have people living in shelters and you have the nerve to look at them and say, well, I think you make enough. Right? Carol, she making $1 million. Never worked a day of her life at UPS. They put a video on where she moved the same box maybe 10 times in a minute. She would pass out if she had to do the work in the warehouse that these brothers and sisters are doing. If she had to get on a truck, she'd probably make one stop before she passed out. All right? Without the working people, which are y'all in America, this world does not move.
I'm from the Bronx. We're out here in Queens today, and I'm not the only one here from the Bronx. We got Danny Kane and Tommy Oliver from Local 202 out in Hunts Point. Coming here to offer our support. We just want you all to know that we have your back. We have your back, and we say we mean this city has your back. This country has your back. Everyday people have your back, because you're not just fighting for yourselves. You are fighting to raise the standard for all working people in this country. That's what this fight is about.
My name is Elijah Buckram. I'm on RPCD. I used to be a 224 head. And I'm actually confident. I believe in Sean O'Brien and Vinnie Perrone. I believe the Teamsters going to negotiate what we need to negotiate. You know what I mean? The working conditions as a UPS driver is hard. You know what I mean? If it's 90 degrees outside, then there's 120 in the back of the truck. I remember when I was a trainee, a guy showed me a cookie dough in a Ziploc bag, and he said, yo, I'm gonna send you a picture at lunch. And at lunch, the cookie dough started to cook. That's how hot it is in the back of a UPS truck. And all we don't want nothing heinous. We just want something fair. You know what I mean? We want equal rights, we want air conditions. We got guys that went out for heat exhaustion. We got people that passed out. A driver called me yesterday, he said his nose was bleeding twice. We just want fair conditions. The part-timers, they getting paid $16 an hour. I think McDonald's get paid more than them, and they work hard. One part-timer is loading 4 at a time. That's 200 pieces a truck on average, so that's 800 pieces a day that one part-time worker is putting in trucks. That's a lot. And to give them $16, that's a slap in the face.
Spent 18 years at UPS. Conditions are as they were 18 years ago, 17 years ago. Nothing changed. We still got to do the work. We still got to deliver. And for the conditions, I mean, you come to work. We all knew what we signed up for when we began the job. And things changed. The inflation ate most of our money. 17, 18 years ago when I started, $60,000 would take me way long further than $120,000 now. So definitely, I want better financial conditions. Like the AC stuff, I'm all for it. I don't know how much it's gonna help us over here in New York. People in the Midwest, they need that more than we are, but I'm all for it.
The amount of work I do in a day, I just feel like I should make more for what I do.
I have a face for radio. Better heard than
I don't know. It's really a lot. Like I don't really want to go into like I couldn't go into detail, but I'll be here like all day basically. But it's just a lot needs to be changed. Management, like even the part-time preloaders too. Like some of them who have a lot of time, they get lazy, and the seniority protects them, so they don't have to do as much work. Me coming in new, somebody who's been here like a year and a half, I have to work extra hard, bust my ass, you feel me, to make nothing. And right now, I'm on my way to my second job. I literally have 2 jobs, even with this, so we don't make enough.
My regular shift is basically I'll go out with the drivers from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m., sometimes 7 p.m. Now, because of this volume being low, I get stuck in the building. Basically, I gotta do my 8 hours in the building. I do 4 hours in the morning, go home, and then have to come back from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. for me to come back in the morning for a 4:15 shift. That's how I got to get my 8 hours. But now I'm in a dilemma where I cannot do the evening shift. So even though we're supposed to be guaranteed our 8, now we're not guaranteed our 8. It's a split shift. So whatever hours you work in one shift, that's the money that you make. Now you don't make it to the second shift, you don't get that. You don't get those 4 hours.
Thank you, 813, 31. Teamsters! Teamsters! Fair contract! Fair contract! Fair contract! Shut it down! If we don't get it, shut it down!
Crazy to me. I mean, particularly the that one guy who says to get his 8 hours, he needs to work, in the morning and then leave and come back at night because they won't just give him straight hours. People, obviously one guy was talking about working full time and then going to his second job. This is over 300,000 workers. The Republicans, with the help of Democrats, have been very successful in crushing unions over the last 40 years. You're going to have to do a lot to crush over 300,000 people. In this case, there's still time. It seems like the Teamster, at least the top brass at the Teamsters, because obviously there's been a big gap between the heads of these unions and the rank and file, with the heads often making decisions not in the best interest of their workers. In this case, from some UPS workers I've spoken with, they seem in lockstep for now with leadership and rank and file. I think this strike is probably going to happen. The media is going to villainize the workers. Be prepared for that because it's going to have effects in slowing down the mail and obviously things like that. Obviously, there are things people rely on, including medication in the mail. But hey, I think this is long overdue, and I'd love your thoughts. It certainly could have a ripple effect if you have this many workers. Not every single one of 300,000 will be out loud and proud. But hell, even if half of them are out loud and proud, that's going to be all over the country. The media will not be able to ignore it. There will be people in the, resistance crowd, the suburban moms crowd, the comfortable crowd that are inconvenienced. And maybe them being inconvenienced will put more of a spotlight on. These are slave-like conditions a lot of people are working under. Your thoughts?
Well, a couple of things. One, I'd love to clip out that clip of AOC saying that she has their back because, and any other member of Congress that comes forward claiming to have the back of the UPS workers, because, when it comes down to the wire later on, we could see something similar to the railroad strike. Like you said, they can't completely block, but there are things that can happen in Congress potentially that could crush any union organizing. So it's important to hold them to account too. The one guy who said the 60,000, that making $60,000 15 years ago, he would have to make 120,000 now to even be close to where he was then. I thought that was profound. I do think that,
particularly in New York, that's where it was.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, yeah, how would you live on anything below 120,000 in New York, really? I think with 300,000 people across the country, like you were saying, doing a strike of this magnitude, that's some hell of a negotiation power, right? I mean, that is, and like you said, for something that can actually impact logistics, that could impact businesses and corporations and small businesses, and then like you said, inconvenience wine moms in suburbia, and they might be coming out yelling at the Teamsters, telling them to to negotiate now. So we'll see how it works. But I really hope that if this does turn into a strike, that not only do the workers get what they need, but that maybe this inspires more action across the country, because it would be such a broad sweeping strike. It would be similar to what we've seen with the railroad strikes or with Amazon. But there's a lot more hubs that are everywhere when it comes to UPS, that everyone knows someone in their family, or there is local warehouses in almost every county in this country, so that it could be really impactful in that way, because it will impact millions of Americans far beyond just those that are striking directly.
Yeah.
But like you said, if they're in line with leadership, maybe, just maybe, they can get to some concessions before it even turns into that, which is what we would really hope for the workers, is that, UPS is smart enough and does what they're supposed to do before it even involves this massive strike that this is leading up to.
And I also think, obviously there was a big wave of workers filing for unions. Starbucks has gone, over 300 winning, unions. Obviously, the company has fought kicking and screaming against that. Amazon in Staten Island, they successfully won that historic union. Amazon hasn't even come to the negotiating table. But if you have something like this, it could inspire more strikes, but also others to say, we need to get a union, because you can't have a strike like this without a strong union. So it could have a ripple effect in terms of kind of rejuvenating and replenishing that union organizing wave that started about 2 years ago, and the strike wave. You remember Striketober and all that, and that would be really, really great, particularly if you have. I mean, obviously this has nothing to do with the election, but I'd love to see somebody like Cornel West out there. That would actually be believable. Cornel West out there with UPS workers. RFK Jr. out there, haven't been out there that long. By the way, spare me.
RFK Jr. doesn't support unions.
Right.
So it'd be ironic.
Spare me this extreme makeover. RFK Jr. the populist. Give me a fucking break. A populist went out campaigning for Hillary Clinton 3 times. I'm a champion of the free market. Says, I'm kind of for universal health care, but it's not practical. Like, what's the difference between him and Obama or Hillary? Oh, because he has a good thought on Ukraine and suddenly is anti-war? You really need to look into some of these things.
He can be, a lot of his policies are the epitome of like the worst, because there were decent libertarian parties, but he's taken like the worst concepts of the libertarians and like the worst concepts of the neoliberal Dems, and then he's like, here's my platform.
And by the way, like, I'm not interested in debating anti-vaxxers, but he's also saying if he becomes president, he's just getting rid of funding against infectious diseases. It's a brilliant idea. So if you want to go down the anti-vax and Wi-Fi gives you cancer route, have at it. But I don't really want somebody who, under the guise of anti-establishment, we're just not going to study infectious diseases and get rid of, X, Y, and Z department. No. Anyway.
Well, I'm autistic as well. So along with this path he took, the misinformation that vaccines cause autism, he's also demonized, my community and spread a lot of misconceptions about neurodivergence or neurotypical behavior. So, yeah, not a big fan for that reason either. But I was, Jordan, I was cracking up. Carpe Diem says, soccer mom, negotiate. I want my Wayfair.
There you go. There you go. So yeah, this will be interesting. And by the way, it costs money to cover these strikes. If they go on strike, we're probably going to cover it around the country, not just near our homes. So please keep those super chats coming. But even more importantly, if you can, sign up as a Status Coup member, $5 to $10 a month. As humbly as I could say it, and Zana knows this, we don't just sit in the studio pontificating like most of these outlets who are all talking about the same shit. I like some of them. You don't have to go on the ground, but it costs a lot more money to go on the ground. Lewis is going to be taking trip number 4 to East Palestine next month. I'm working on some things in the background. I'll probably be back on the road this month. Obviously, Tina was just back in Cop City. John Farina going on the road. He was covering this strike. So we're out there on the ground. We don't just kind of talk the talk. We walk the walk, but it costs money. StatusCoup.com/join. You could join us for $5 to $10 a month. It makes a big difference. And
Yeah,
by the way,
hotel rooms, food, that stuff
flights,
really adds up to be on the ground. Flights, yeah, and where everything else is more expensive, doing on the ground reporting has gotten more expensive just simply because you have to travel to do it.
Yeah. So definitely support us and check out Zana on Twitter. She's always tweeting up a storm. Are you still doing the bullhorn?
No, not right now. I'm working on a book about the Bernie Sanders movement, a Bernie Boom and Bust, which should be out in, I think, I'm estimating about a month and a half to 3 months.
You got a publisher before me, motherfucker?
Nope, self-publishing.
Okay, never mind.
I have had
I'll read it,
but I don't know if I would want to go that route and have them edit out all the tea I'm going to be spilling. No, I'm just kidding. It's about tracking talking about Bernie's movement, what inspired, what happened, what developed through it. We've all seen the disappointment of the progressive candidates, the ups and downs. Most people in the chat or most people watching have probably felt it politically across the country in general. And it's kind of talking about that, the organizations, but then also I have a few chapters on lessons learned as to kind of where we can move forward, not only with local organizing, but electorally. What can we do out of all of this that's happened the last few years, all of this momentum that was built up around Bernie, all the momentum that is still happening? Where do we go from here?
Can you write a special chapter just for my interest on the incestual cesspool that is online left media and the purity games that has fractured since the Bernie Sanders movement? I would read that personally.
I've got one.
Oh, terrific.
And I've got one about the lack of reporting on issues, and I actually talk about how Status Coup is one of the few that does. So,
why? Thank you. And I didn't even pay her. I didn't even pay her to say that. No, we love you here. I want to have you on more often. You've been open that you're trying to find full-time work. So if anybody wants to hit up Zana, she's terrific. Marketing, fundraising, messaging, branding, you name it. So definitely check her out on Twitter and elsewhere. Actually, I think some of the super chats are addressed to you, so stick around for a sec. Tony D, $2. So happy the amazing Zana Day is back. Me too. I did ask her like a month or two ago, so hasn't been for a lack of trying. She either didn't have her phone or wasn't around. Kush Renata, $10. So basically, if Biden wins in 2024, Dems just move on. If Trump wins, Dems get to load up their pockets of hate, Trump echo chamber until next election. And this is why duopoly has destroyed democracy. That's a great point, because being in the minority, particularly against a Trump, is a money-making machine for the Democrats, like the Women's March, which was a good thing. But there was a lot of money made by a lot of Democratic consultants, think tanks, groups in being the resistance. So yeah.
Today I tweeted that, Democrats have abandoned the red states, the Republican states, because they have to have a boogeyman to then go and fundraise off of. So sometimes I see them only doing so much to the point to where it's like there's an adversary in the duopoly. There has to be a dichotomy that's created. Just like all the fundraising emails we saw go out the day that Roe versus Wade was overturned. They already had those ready and written so that they could rake the money in. But that's a really, really good point she made.
Absolutely. Ellen, $5. Thank you. Discovered you all via Due Dissidence. Thanks for your commentary. Keep going. Why, thank you. I appreciate that. Carpe Diem, $5. Jordan, could you please do a show on the digital dollar? The backlash on digi-dollars could truly crater Biden. I feel like a boomer. What's the digi-dollar? Is that different than the Bitcoin? Is that different than?
What we're talking about now is eliminating printable money. So that's something that the Biden administration has floated is to start a process so that within the next decade, this is my understanding. I would need to read a little bit more about it to go super deep, but within the next 10 years to eliminate physical currency. And folks are very concerned about that because actual physical currency, digital can be manipulated. A lot of people, there are still people that feel more comfortable with an actual physical dollars on them, or have savings set aside in case there's an emergency in physical dollars. So there's a worry about manipulation and how it can impact currency. If everything is tracked through the government through a digital dollar rather than a physical dollar,
Interesting.
through a federal banking system. So
I will put that on my list to cover. That's very interesting. Chris Garrett, $5. Tina and John did great reporting on Cop City, and Tina did an excellent interview with Mike Prisner on DeSantis and his Gitmo involvement. Yes, that's a good reminder that we need to put a clip of that out on social media. That was very good. Mike has done amazing work on DeSantis, the torturer. And fortunately, well, I don't know how to say fortunately, because it means Trump's doing well. I'm glad Trump is kicking DeSantis' ass because I think Trump is awful. I actually think DeSantis could be worse than Trump because he's Trump and competent and knows how to push policy through. I also think his wife is kind of equal, if not running the show, to DeSantis from reports. And she seems to be a true believer and is really big on this anti-trans shit and, don't come for our kids. So just the total DeSantis package, I'm glad they're really not doing well. But he was also a monster based on the reporting and really, really took pleasure in helping, the torture and illegal stuff that went on in Guantanamo and in Iraq, where he was too. Fly Chomper Fly, $2. You're right, Jordan. I voted for no one very often. Yeah. I like David Axelrod. Maybe he needs to look at the data because the data shows majority of Jill Stein voters wouldn't have voted, not gone to Hillary. Humorous, $20. Hello, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. In a world that's collapsing around you, I really don't have too much more advice. All I could say is take care of each other. Take care of the garden that takes care of you. I agree. And last week was just fucking brutal. Four of the hottest days on record in 5 days. Yet it's not leading newscasts. They're not even talking about it now. They're talking about other shit like cocaine in the White House. Like
and
that's
going to impact. That's going to impact crop share, and it's already impacting our food supply right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, $10. Question for Zana. Wasn't the dream of Democrats to turn the states like Texas and Florida blue? It seems like they just have given up on Southern Democratic parties. They've given up on more than just the South. They've given up, Zana has covered this extensively, that they're not even trying in most red states.
Yeah, there's no infrastructure there. They've stopped, National has stopped helping to subsidize the states, which, needs a little bit of national support. Republicans are really good at organizing in these states. I mean, they're going to like Optimist League games, they're funding like the teams, they're, giving money to start libraries and stuff. They are doing local things while at the same time, passing fascist legislation. But the Dems, it was 80, I think I mentioned this earlier in the show, 75 to 80% of all local seats in the red states, almost every red state. You can look it up on Ballotpedia, look up uncontested seats in 2022. 75 to 80% of seats in these quote unquote red states were unchallenged. That's an insane amount. So that means that there was no one to vote for other than the Republican running, because there was no Democrat running, no independent running. And so a lot of these laws, the anti-trans bills and others, are highly unfavorable in these states, and the people don't want them. But they didn't really get to have an election. Their representatives were appointed by the Republican Party.
Hubris, $100. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I find it amazing that Americans still want to fight amongst themselves with this left and right crap. Where is Amazon? Where's FedEx? Where's the truckers? Why is not everyone standing with these people? With that many, we could literally fight for anything. I don't have all the answers, but one thing I can tell you, there's a difference between us and the French. They have healthcare. They have basic social safety net measures that give them more, instills less fear in them to go out there and, protest, because they're not in paralyzing fear. Not that they want to lose their job, but, if you lose your job in a European country, not that that's pleasurable, but your kids still have health insurance. You still have health insurance. You still have certain rights of just being a citizen and human rights. So I think that makes it a lot easier and they have a lot stronger unions in those countries. Labor has not been, it has been decimated all over the globe, but not like in America. So that's a big reason, I would say, Zana, why you have such militant protests in these other countries that actually has forced concessions from Macron and elsewhere. In India, you had hundreds of thousands of people protesting. But here, not as much, because people are understandably, if you lose your job, it could mean you're out on the streets with your kids.
And right to work laws, when right to work laws were passed, coupled with those were laws that cut back on any kind of protection for union organizers. For instance, in Kentucky, only people who work specific government jobs are now covered under any type of union worker protection. So these places can just fire you. Just flat out. The last 25 years, it's been chopped away by both Democrats and Republicans. By both Republicans and Democrats have chipped away at union laws in these states. And so there are some states that are really strong, and you'll see the union stronger there, like New York is a lot stronger. So you'll see that's where a lot of the protests and the strikes will happen first, or in the states where it's the strongest. But there are some states where the policies are so weak that there's literally no protection for the workers at all. They can just be fired tomorrow if they were to go on strike.
Peace, Robert Walker, $5. RFK Jr. is a true galaxy brain politician. By the way, it should be said, he's not that you would ever expect this from a Kennedy. He would probably do a lot better running as an independent, because most of his support is not actually among Democrats.
Yeah.
I hate to be like he's not a Democrat, but if you look at the polls, most of his support is coming from moderates and Republicans. He's not really popular among Democratic voters. I think I've seen like somewhere between 8 and 10% of Democrats support him. A lot of the rest of his support is coming from more moderates, Republicans, etc. Take that for what it is, and he does have galaxy brain.
I was really shocked when he announced that he was running Democrat. I knew that he was considering running for the presidency, so I assumed he would run Libertarian, because he's been involved in the Libertarian Party. And then just recently, in the last, few years, and then when I saw he was running Dem, I was like,
I don't think he'd be invited. I don't think he'd be invited to the annual sale in sailing in Hyannisport if he was running as an independent, because he's still part of the Kennedy clan. Das Boot Fleiss, €5.99. It's good to see Zana again. I agree. If she'll come back, we'll have her back more often. She's always been great to work with, and I'm glad. And she's super smart, a lot smarter than me, particularly on the brass tacks of politics and kind of the machines at play. So, any parting words, Zana? Where people could find you?
At Zeynab Day on Twitter is where I'm at most of the time right now. I will be still doing some shows in the future when I get settled in, so keep an eye out for that. And some shows on either Bullhorn Bulletin or just something. I'm even thinking about doing some TikToks. I don't know, you guys. When you're in transition in life, there's all opportunities.
Speaking of, I don't even know what it is. I don't know if Twitter is going to be around by the end of the year, but Colin, if you have it, we're on Threads now. I'm not thrilled about it because I don't really want to support another billionaire asshole, but we are on Threads. If you've gotten on Threads, I guess it's Facebook's competition to Twitter. It's Status Coup News. So follow us there. I went on Threads. What do you call it? Threaded or posted on Threads. It's basically a Twitter knockoff. I mean, it's basically identical. So yeah, we'll be posting there too. We're on Blue Sky as well. So that's that of there. So yeah, follow us there and definitely follow Zana on the Twitter. And thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Zana. We'll be back at it tomorrow. I am going to be on the ground Wednesday, so I'll tell you more about that tomorrow. And another one, Fly Jump Fly, $2. If Kennedy gets elected, he will change to neo-lib. There's nothing to change to. He is neo-lib. He's not for He's not for Medicare for all. He's not even for a public option. I haven't heard anything from him about fighting for a higher minimum wage. He talks the big game about the military, but I haven't heard a dollar amount that he would try to cut, nor how he would get through, the one-party military-industrial complex. So I think he's smartly targeting a specific message that he knows is popular right now, which is being against the Russia-Ukraine war. But on the brass tacks politics, I don't see much of a difference between him, Hillary Clinton, Obama, Bill Clinton.
But like Fly said, if he was somehow to get elected, that it would expose his neoliberalism and nothing else.
Yes. Absolutely. All right. Thank you, everybody. Talk to you later.